Give us 1 second to start the webcast. Thanks, Les. And we are live. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome everyone to our electronic library committee meeting. I would like to welcome the chief administrative officers from our area townships, as well as the region CAO. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, regional council is practicing physical distancing, and all the councillors who are members of this committee are participating electronically. Councillors, if at any time you want to speak to a matter, please raise your hand and identify yourself. Please keep your devices muted until called upon to speak so that we can avoid feedback from our devices. So we'll ask Stevie to do the roll call.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Councillor Nowak.
Present.
Councillor Foxton.
Pick me, I'm here.
Chair Redmond. As ex officio.
I am here, and Sousa Hardak to follow.
And Councillor Shantz.
I'm also here.
Thank you. All present.
Perfect. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, let's move on to the agenda items as listed. Service review update. Helen, you're going to introduce this, I take it?
I will indeed. So,
perfect.
So everyone will remember that we did a service review of the library services. I'm actually just going to do a quick little presentation to get us all up to speed about where we currently are. Take us a little bit down memory lane about where we started, and then we can have a quick little discussion about next steps. So here we are. You'll all remember way back in 2019, we got some funding to do some review of our services, and library services was one of those ones that was selected. So the review was done by KPMG, and way back in February, it was presented to all 4 of the township councils. And then it was sent to staff to figure out what to do next. So these are the recommendations that KPMG sent forward, which is this whole idea that we should modify what we currently have, which is this centralized operating system. And there were some recommendations about changing the governance as well as changing the ownership of the buildings. They gave us some rough overviews of some of the benefits that would come out of this reviewed structure, and a lot of it has to do with being more efficient, being more effective, increasing communication, and being able to do this process quickly and with as little cost and as little risk as possible. But they also flagged a few little risks out there, understanding that through the review process, we found that there were some communication issues, the whole idea of ownership and service delivery and how that all sat together, and ensuring that we all understand what our expectations are. So that's a brief summary of what KPMG came up with. So since last February, when councils directed staff to work together, the CAOs and I and Rod as well have been involved in some conversations, really going through the KPMG review right from the beginning, and their recommendations. And we've looked at everything they brought forward, and carte blanche delivering the recommendations as they stood may not be the best way forward. And looking through all of the information that they gave us, there were 4 areas that we feel really need to have some attention brought to them. One has to do with facilities management, one with program coordination, one with strategic integration, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, and the other one was governance. And the themes that kept coming through we really need to have some immediate addressing on is improved communication, clarifying of expectations, and coordination of our resources, right? So we're all working efficiently together. So here's what we're recommending as the path forward. Facilities management, we'd like to set up some very targeted and specific meetings with facilities managers at the region and at the township, involving the CAOs and the library manager to talk about strategic issues that we're finding, how we can work together, setting a stage for expectations, understanding that all of our service level agreements need to be looked at. And we feel that this approach is going to help us to address some of the issues that KPMG brought up, which is changing the ownership of those buildings something that we really want to do? If it is, how are we going to go about doing that? But in the meantime, are there some strategic things that we can do to talk together? And actually, I'm going to take a little mini step back to say, fundamentally, we deal well with the strategic operation of the libraries with the library committee as it works, and we work well with the tactical operations and township coordination. So if there's something going on with the HVAC, we know how to solve that. If there's something going on with an opportunity to do program coordination, we're doing that. But there's a chunk in the middle that's missing, and that's the sort of strategic coordination piece. So as we sit around the library committee table, we're looking at the systems operation as a whole, and what we really need is better integration of township priorities. And how are we going to do that? And these are these very strategic targeted meetings that we're going to be setting up to make sure that we're having the right conversations at the right level with the right people. So not the doers on the ground and not the really high strategic level, but this township staff and library staff and regional staff working together. So here's facilities management as one area. We know who we're going to get in the room together. We know what we're going to start talking about. Program coordination, very similar idea, right? But not with the regional facilities folks. Township people probably will be similar people, but talking about who's going to take on what, as what does our community need in each of the townships, who's going to take on what kind of programming delivery, who's best placed to deliver what kinds of things, how are we going to use the various spaces that we have available to ensure that we're working together and coordinating our approaches. We're not duplicating activity, but instead are working in concert together. And so this identifies some of those that were identified there in the KPMG report, that we need to work a little bit better on our collaboration and a little bit more about our service level expectations. Strategic integration. Now this is that I was really talking about, with how do we insert township priorities into the library operations, because library operations have been dealt with as a whole thing. How do we make sure that those strategic priorities from the township are really integrated in there? And how do we make sure that we're having those conversations at the right level to ensure that the township CEOs are aware of what's going on in library operations? So we're going to be setting up regular meetings with each township CAO and with our manager of our library system to make sure that we're talking about how we're delivering services, what are the priorities in each of the townships, how are we making sure that those branches in those townships and the programs that are being delivered are appropriate for what the priorities are at that township level, as well as considering it at as strategic and system-wide level. And finally, governance. And this was kind of the number one thing that KPMG recommended. We understand that there are some communications and service level pieces that we really need to fix first. And then we need to start getting all of our clerks people together to talk about, what does changing governance structure look like? What is the best structure for ensuring that we're meeting the needs of our community, as well as meeting the needs within the current structure that exists, understanding that our structure is inside of the Municipal Act. So KPMG recommended some very specific structure for that governance. We want to make sure that from our own level, we're seeing that that's the right recommendation, that's the right way to go forward. So here we are tackling that low-hanging fruit, right? Making sure we get communication straight, making sure that we get the right people talking to the right people. We're talking about strategic issues, we're talking about systemic issues. We're getting the right people together to deal with the issues that we're facing, improving our service level understanding, improving our communication, making sure that we're taking advantage of opportunities as they present themselves, and that we're doing the best thing for our residents, both from a system-wide perspective as well as a more targeted township perspective. And hopefully, my CAO colleagues will jump in if I've missed anything at all. But that's a brief overview about how we think we can start moving this forward with the recommendations that came out of KPMG.
Thank you, Helen. Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Fox?
Thank you, Chair. Am I still muted? No, okay. I have to tell you, we're not going to sell our building. That building was paid for by the people of North Dumfries. We're letting it go. It is a phenomenal building. A second issue I have concerns with is that we fall under regional council. They really have nothing to do with us. They rubber stamp us. We pay 100% of everything, and we, including the staff for the regional council time. So a separate board made up of the township's members or politicians or whatever has its right, I think is a must. And again, I'm not going to let go of our building. And the final thing is the sore point I still have, that you walked in, you took all of our historical documents, and they still have not come back. Now, reading from Quinn Fletcher's list, she lists that a good percentage of those documents existed before Waterloo County existed, and they were given directly to the community of Ayr. But all of them are gone. And the longer we wait for them to be gone, the longer we're going to take to get them back. And I'm not sure we'll get them all back. And that needs to be clarified. So the breakdown of communication is coming from, on my side, from a lot of things that were done without our consent, without our knowledge, and were, in my feelings, acts of hostility towards North Dumfries and Ayr, that we didn't matter, that you could take whatever you want. To actually go and take our keys and unlock our cabinets and take our stuff, I'm really affronted about. I'm still quite angry about it. And Andrew will tell me I'll have to get over it. And I eventually will, Andrew, after I've thrown a golf club at David or so. But anyways, so number one is the building. It's a no-go for me at all. And number two is we have to set up, I don't think we should fall under the council, the regional council. We can work with still having the paying for the staff that we use and everything else, but I don't even think the council cares. They really don't. I'd be surprised if any of them's ever read a library minute.
Thank you, Sue. Sandy.
Thanks. Yeah, I was making just a couple of notes, and I have to agree with Sue. I'm having trouble wrapping myself around the facility piece. Yeah, and I'll go back to what I wrote down. There's four. I see four pieces to this. There's facility. There's the resources, the library resources. There's programming, and there's governance. And as far as I'm concerned, the facility, the programming, and the governance is something that is shared and needs to be coordinated and managed better. And the resources are obviously, well, they're owned by the libraries as well. So these are all very much township pieces. And so I think the difficulty comes in why are we leaning more to the region and less to the townships when it's, basically all township owned resources and township owned pieces. I had another thought, but I'll come back to that.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. Joel?
Yeah, excuse me. Similar sentiments with regard to buildings. I'm not sure how I could see that justified when it, when we look at places like Linwood, it's got a beautiful facility there, and there's been a lot of effort put into that. We do need another facility. We need a different facility in St. Clements, and certainly the Wellesley facility isn't ideal as well. So there's issues that are surrounding those two units as well. When it comes to programming, and I should know this answer, but how did KPMG or anyone reach out to the clients, to the users of the library, do any sort of survey to find out what exactly they're looking for? And I'm just wondering why that isn't an important part of this discussion. I mean, if we're not addressing their concerns, if we don't know their concerns, how can we address their concerns? And maybe there aren't any concerns. Those are the types of issues I think that we should be looking at.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Rick?
Thank you. Just on the ownership piece, maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought that as CAOs, we had discussed that we recommend maintaining ownership within the townships. We don't see the rationale behind selling the buildings to the region, especially these buildings are multi-use. They're not strictly library. So I think that was our recommendation.
Geez, that sounds like a resolution.
Of course, if the price is right, you know, everything's for sale, but
I'm not sure about that. Anyway, Bruce.
Thank you, Chair. Helen, do you just want to confirm, because I think there may have been a bit of a misunderstanding. We're not suggesting. Yeah. So maybe go over the pieces.
Yeah. So I'll just clarify that piece. It was just understanding that KPMG said this thing. It needs to be talked about so that we all come to an agreement about what the way forward is. All the conversations we've had until now have very much been we don't see the value or the benefit of doing this kind of change, but we know that we need to have the conversation out loud with each other between regional staff as well as township staff, so we're all on the same page about how we're proceeding. So, but that's the idea about setting up these targeted meetings, is to discuss these things so we're all 100% on the same page and understand how we're going to be moving forward.
Thank you. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair Armstrong. Just to add one more compliment to Helen's presentation, in terms of next steps, we as a group of 4 CAOs, Bruce and Helen, have been meeting off and on since we reported to the 4 township councils in March of 2021. And we committed at that point in time, we'd be returning back to the 4 township councils with a strategy in terms of what did we find coming out of the KPMG analysis? What do we believe to be the appropriate priorities or areas of focus, which largely Helen has touched upon, and then basically get buy-in from the respective councils. A similar report would go through the regional process to regional council to provide them with an update and perhaps for the first time a true introduction of some of the elements that were identified in the KPMG study and what's occurring through discussions similar to what we're having today. It's our intent to come to our respective councils in the next few months to provide that reporting and get political buy-in at the local level, in our case, and obviously for Bruce and Helen at council. And that would then become our marching orders, for lack of a better term, to further delve deeper into some key elements that Helen touched upon toward implementation then of some of those deliverables.
Thanks, Andrew. Sandy?
Thanks. I don't know, David, if you want to go first. You haven't spoken yet? No. Okay. This is a good discussion to have, and I'm glad we're all having it and having it together. I think that's important. But I also think it's highlighting exactly what the problem has been. And that is communication. Because what I heard from your presentation, Helen, was that that everything would be consolidated in the region. The region would have the buildings. You're saying we need to communicate better, but it's all being consolidated at the region, and then with a different governance structure, which feels very kind of patronizing, to be quite blunt. So I think that's highlighting how we've gotten to where we are today. And that's the piece that we need to work through if we're going to continue to work in this sort of structure. So yeah, I'm sort of processing all of that and trying to keep an open mind through that, but that's a little bit difficult.
Thanks, Andy. David?
Yeah, thanks. Through you to the committee, a couple of things. First of all, I want to take us back for a minute to the fact that when we first, as township CAOs, approached the region, this actually predates even Bruce as regional CAO, and met with Mike Murray. One of the key things I think for us was a very receptive tone to the fact that the region had made some strategic staffing changes in Helen being in her position and Rod Regier being in his position. And we were assured that there would be a climate where we would all be able to benefit from a climate of continuous improvement, learning, understanding where we can do better. And, you know, I want to assure the township mayors and members that, you know, that certainly has been the climate all along. And I want to, you know, emphasize, like others have, KPMG recommended the facilities side. We didn't. You know, we sat down as a group. You know, and let's be real here. We sat down as a group because we knew there was more work to do that we originally thought KPMG would do, but that we took upon ourselves. And, you know, in fairness, you know, what I feel we've seen as township CAOs meeting with Helen and her team and Rod and Bruce, et cetera, is a recognition that the friction points over the years have been listening to, and I'll just speak for myself, township staff talk about there needs to be better communication, facilities issues, who's doing what, you know, and there never seemed to be an effort, in fairness, on either side for us to ever finally resolve the issue around who should be responsible for what, even around maintenance of facilities. You know, I would hear constantly our recreation staff talk about, wow, you know, we could really be doing more in terms of overall coordination. You know, recreation and library services are evolving over the years. There could be more. So I'd like to think, hopefully, you know, we should emphasize to you, that's why you're seeing really some of the key points here around, we feel through better communication, we can collectively do better around the services and programs maybe we jointly deliver to the public, how we actually maintain and manage these facilities in an appropriate way. And then, you know, this might be more of my personal thing. I've always felt, knowing how busy you are as township mayors, that the governance needed to be strengthened to be able to have more resources around the table, more community input. And so the governance is meant, you know, and there's still work to do, obviously, there, as it's been acknowledged, but the governance meant is that's another area that we feel we can do better going forward, so that there is the number of members and the amount of time that's able to be dedicated to be able to advance all of these things. So those are the things that I wanted to emphasize today, but I really want to thank, you know, Helen and Rod and Bruce and previously Mike, a willingness to sit down and talk through these issues. It certainly was good open dialogue.
Thanks, Dave. Bruce?
Thank you, Chair Armstrong. Yeah, just to carry on, I think Councillor Shantz's point about communication, and I wanted to make sure, Helen, that we maybe go back over the recommendations, or if that would be helpful, that this is the 4 CAOs and Helen and I working together and saying to you as the library board, this is what we think the path forward is. So we're saying, no, we don't want to be selling those facilities for all the points that you've made. So we're disagreeing with some of the things that KPMG said, and in fact, I think vehemently agreeing with you that we're all on the same wavelength. So would it be helpful if we just go back over each of the 4 again? Because I want to make sure that we aren't giving the impression to the councillors and mayors of the townships that we are doing something to you or we're not in agreement. I think we are saying the same thing as you are.
Yes. So hang on a second. So what we're recommending, and I think this is a good point, what we're recommending is to set up structured, ongoing, regular meetings at a variety of levels in order to address systemic issues. It's not to implement KPMG's recommendations, but rather looking at what KPMG recommended, let's set up ongoing regular meetings where we understand expectations from one another. So my apologies, and I will certainly fall on my sword for bad communication in this presentation, because what we're actually trying to do is increase the communication with the township, to increase the input from the township, to increase the drive and responsiveness to local township need. That's the idea. So we're setting up 4 working groups, for lack of a better term. 1 to talk about facilities needs, 1 to talk about programming needs, 1 to talk about strategic integration so that township priorities are plugged in directly into library operations in a more granular way than they currently are. And the final working group to talk about governance and how that's going to work. So those are the recommendations. And I think there's going to be a certain amount of sort of suck it and see to see how those groups need to be formed to deal with the issues that we're finding on an ongoing basis. And I was trying to relate that back to the KPMG report to sort of say we heard something and we got to do something about it, not necessarily we got to do what KPMG did.
Thanks, Helen. We hired KPMG to do a job and use their expertise to have a look at something and come back with the recommendations. And it wasn't, I mean, I personally wouldn't look at it as something that, you know, they come back, we do. They come back, provide us their thoughts and their professional opinion, then we go over and come up with whatever the best solution is for ourselves, which is what I see is that the CAOs and staff are doing. And I really appreciate it. I think that's great. I mean, you know, we're having conversation. The decision's already been made that the one recommendation that they made has already been decided it's not going to occur, which is fantastic. And Helen, I want you to know that this is actually a weapons-free zone, so there will be no falling on swords or anything around here. So I think that, you know, I think that we're on the right track, and I think we're going to get there. And I think we're in a position with the staff that we have, the CAOs, and ourselves, that we know what the target is, and that's better communication. If we can come up with a governance process where we have more citizen involvement, you know, like, you know, the committee here is 4 mayors. And I think, you know, in my own opinion is, I think that if each township has someone, a citizen sitting as part of the committee, that, you know, from their view as being outside of the municipality and staffing, I think that would be very important. So, and you are already having that discussion. So I think we're really on the right road, and it's not something we're going to fix overnight. I mean, something that I would be very adamant about is that whole process with the archives from AIR, that they should be addressed post haste. I personally would like to see that looked after last week. So, you know, because it's something that's been ongoing, and that has to be awful frustrating for the local citizens to see all of their history taken and moved outside of the community. That's not the right thing. I mean, here we have the advantage, we have a museum with our own archives, which the region doesn't have keys to, so we're good. So I think we're really on the right track, and I think all the CAOs know how we all feel, and they will get us to the point of being, I think, in a good position and getting a better communication and a better setup for ourselves. And I think it'll work out well, working better together, more communications with programming and everything. I think we have capability of doing that. And hopefully we'll get there soon. Sandy.
Thanks. I wonder if, Steve, if unless we're going to wrap up the discussion now, I wonder if Stevie could maybe take the recommendations that are coming from the CAOs and just put those recommendations on a slide for us in point form and just forget the KPMG stuff. Let's just look at what you guys are recommending to us and we can talk about that.
That makes sense.
I will need a few minutes to copy those from each of the slides.
Okay.
Well, take your time. Don't rush because I don't want you to make any spelling mistakes or anything. So.
I think around 2 o'clock, I'm going to, I might switch to my phone and I'll disappear from the site. I've got other places to go today, so I can do it on the run.
All right. We appreciate the heads up. Okay, are there any more comments on this? Okay, thank you. I think we can carry on until that we can get some of the other business done. So the next item is the financial report. And Carol, I think you're going to, Carol Pfeiffer. Yes. Hi, Carol, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I am having internet issues, so I'm hoping this will go okay, but we'll see. So I'll share my screen. Okay, so this is the report. Basically, these numbers are a little bit old because they're actual numbers as of June 30th. And at that point, we just gave an update on how the financial situation was. So year to date, at the end of June, we had a favorable savings relative to the budget of $212,000. And the bulk of that was coming from compensation savings because some of the branches had been closed because of the pandemic. So the savings related was $162,000. And as well, we had some savings from printing, programming, travel, conferences, and communications, and slight overages in janitorial. So take you to the table down here, basically the same information. Here you can see the salaries and benefits, $162,000, slight favorable in operating costs, slight unfavorable in revenues, which is shortfalls because we're no longer collecting fines and we're not doing a lot of programming. So overall, at the end of June, we were favorable $212,000. And then we also have a table related to our year-end projections. So we're projecting about $278,000 favorable for year-end. The bulk of that is coming from, again, from salaries and benefits. And then again, a shortfall coming from revenue. And then the only other thing in the report is basically that usually this money, if approved by the library committee, goes, the surplus goes into the library capital reserve.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. So that is for nation purposes. So the next item is the operations update, and that's Cheryl.
No, Cheryl's not here.
I'm afraid Cheryl's on vacation.
She is, so I'm assuming then, Helen, you're taking the lead.
I'll step up. I'll step up.
Atta girl.
So I'm assuming you've all read it. You've now had it for a long time. I think the highlights really are that we're putting targeted effort into membership growth. And we're also seeing a real strong trend that when those branches are open, our community really likes to come in and deal with physical books. So there is certainly an interest in online ebooks. However, those physical items really are something that our community really values. And so we're continuing to work with that, right? We're also trying to take away those barriers to membership. So trying to ensure that it's as simple as possible to get a membership. People now can sign up online, right? All those things that really try to encourage our community to continue to engage with us, and building those partnerships with the township and collaborating with the township in order to deliver those services together. Deliver things that our community are saying that they're interested in, and finding new parts of our community to engage with, particularly looking at things like our online programming. Even when in-person programming comes back, chances are we're not going to let go of that online programming because it's really served a different part of our community. So now we're finding that we can grow that membership because we have different tools to use to engage different segments of the population. So that's the big message coming out of that operations report.
Okay, very good, thank you. And I agree that there's probably a lot more people that are appreciating the actual paper books. And there was a cartoon somebody posted that showed a little girl sitting in a chair reading a book, and she said, real books are fantastic because you can fall asleep and not miss the ending. So it's really kind of cool. So are there any other comments or anything? So that was just another report for information purposes. And I see Stevie is here and she obviously has something for us.
Can everyone see that okay?
I think so. Anybody have any comments or questions on those? I don't see any. So I guess it's just a matter of that being sent to all of us, I think, Stevie.
Yes, I can do that. Did you wish to have this recommendation approved at this committee meeting?
We could do that. We could have these if we're prepared to do that. Sue, you have a comment.
I don't think we want to approve the recommendations. I think we want to go through them in more detail before we approve anything. So I think this should be just for information. And then when deeper dive into it to see, I can't approve this. I have to look at all of these things and what they involve and how they implement things. To approve this now is not doing our due diligence.
Yeah, I'm not sure that what we have here, Sue, is a final thing. What we're doing, maybe it's better as a direction to staff to follow these recommendations and to come back with a final report for us.
Not to follow these recommendations. This is to give to staff to look into and provide a report on what's here and how they would change it or add to it, but not follow them, because that's again passing it. And that's again not doing our due diligence. This is a guideline for staff to use and to look deeper into.
Okay, that's fine. Sandy, Chance?
Yeah, thanks. I don't have a problem with these recommendations. All I see on here is setting up meetings to discuss, and I think that's important to carry on with. I don't see anything that says we're going to really change anything at this point in time. So in terms of what's here on the screen, setting up meetings and discussing, I'm okay with that.
I tend to agree with you, Sandy, that that's what it is that we're sending it back, that the CEOs are going to have more discussions and maybe come up with some recommendations to us as to what what they see as the next steps in the process that we want to go through on each of those.
So basically, this takes us out of the equation. It leaves it to staff only. Discuss priorities, opportunities for collaboration, and set up expectations. Set the stage for programming and working groups. So this is basically said it's decided it, and they just have to, we're saying, this is what we're passing. This is how the libraries are going to run. Tell us how they implement it. And I don't know if that's where we want to be.
Okay, maybe it needs to say and report back to the board at the next meeting.
Well, I think you're probably right that if we have it in there somewhere that's what it is that we're giving staff the direction to come up with a report as to how they see everything working out, and then bringing it back to a committee to accept.
Stevie, maybe a report on the following recommendations. Okay, and to provide, okay.
1 second.
Poor Stevie.
I think that's got it, yeah. So that's now a direction to come back with the report. Is that acceptable to everybody? Getting nodding heads. That's good. Okay.
Rick's got his hand up there, or he had his hand up there, Les.
Yeah. Rick, you wanted to add something?
I was just going to agree with some of the comments that were made by the councillors that these aren't necessarily recommendations at this point for the committee. They really are a direction of how we want to proceed to come up with the recommendations. And what I really see is staff is that we are absolutely recommending that ownership maintains the way it is at the lower tier. However, I think our next steps are refining the agreements between the library staff and the townships, as well as refining what our recommendation would be for the committee structure. I think that's really our next steps on this. So I can agree with the wording that's used there now, that it's direction to staff to come back with more, using this as the guideline for how we're going to get to those recommendations.
So everything is now on paper instead of in stone. Sue, you had a comment?
Just a question, Rick, you were saying that it's decided that it will stay at the regional level. So rather that, so has that been decided?
So obviously as staff, we can't make that decision. However, our recommendation, and correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues, but our recommendation would be that ownership stays at the current level.
Okay, because yeah, because that has not come to councils yet.
No.
Thank you.
Okay. Everybody's happy with that? As it is written, as being a direction?
You may have noticed that I've just added 2 words to the preamble for the recommendations, where I've got proposed staff recommendations. Perhaps that would clarify that currently these are only proposed.
Perfect. That's why we have clerks, to make ourselves clear. Okay. So there we go. That's the direction, and we'll all get a copy of that, I guess. Please and thank you.
Les, did you want to have a mover and a seconder for this direction?
Yeah, we better do that.
That
So
might
that's
be best.
moved by Councillor Shantz, seconded by Councillor Nowak. All in favor? That's carried.
Stevie, if you remove that, we can see everybody. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see if the chair voted on that or not. I just couldn't see if she was listening.
My armpits and alligators right now. I am listening though, sorry.
Okay, we'll take your word for it. So that looks like we've covered all the agenda. Is there any other business that we want to have a discussion on? Everybody's excited to talk. Good. So if there's no other business, we will adjourn the meeting. And that is moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Foxton. Just one hand is all you need, Sue. That's it. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for getting me done by 2.
You're welcome. Everybody have a safe drive home.
Have a
Enjoy the
great day.
wedding.
Yes.